You might have heard it a couple of times that composition is one of the most important but also the most complex tool in photography, and that it can take years to master. In this lesson, I will share with you 9 easy composition techniques to get you started. I was able to use most of the composition techniques in this photo shoot, starting with leading lines. Leading lines is a composition technique where you use natural lines to lead your viewer's eyes. You can do this by positioning your camera or props in such a way that it creates a natural line that most of the time points to the subject or hero. Next is using shapes and patterns. Our viewers are humans, so it pays to understand how the human eyes work or how humans see things. We are drawn to shapes and patterns. Remember when we were younger, we liked to look at the clouds and guess the shapes and patterns we see. We can take advantage of this human behavior in photography. We can use props, styling, and the way we position the elements in our scene to create shapes and patterns. Another composition technique is diagonals, or using diagonals. Just like how we are drawn to shapes and patterns, we are also drawn to diagonal or to the diagonal flow in an image. Same thing with the other composition techniques. You use diagonals to guide you in styling and composing your shots. The next composition technique is the rule of thirds, which is very famous among photographers. By positioning your main subject as well as other important parts of your photo a third of the way into the frame, you'll often get a very pleasing result. Imagine that your image is divided into 9 equal parts by 2 equally spaced horizontal lines and 2 equally spaced vertical lines. Then you position important compositional elements along these lines or their intersections. Most cameras and smartphones have the rule of thirds grid by default, so you can just turn it on whenever you are taking photos, so you can use it as a guide to compose your shot. Another famous composition technique is symmetry. This is achieved when 2 almost identical halves of an image seem equal in balance and importance. The next composition technique is quite contradicting but can result in powerful images. Negative space is related to minimalist composition. It emphasizes not just the subject but the empty space around the subject. The viewer's eyes may be drawn to a central figure, but they can't help noticing the large section of emptiness that surrounds and defines that figure. The space surrounding your main subject in the photo is called the negative space, whereas your main subject is the positive space. I use this composition as well to give space for text, especially for photos that will be used for posters, ads, and promotions. The next composition technique is my favorite. Human touch is what the name suggests. Using human touch to make your photo look more interesting and to help tell a story. There was a survey done that a photo of a product with a hand got more engagement than the photo with just the product. You can combine this composition with other techniques like placing the human element in the rule of thirds or use it as a leading line. The key is creating a balanced, eye-catching, and pleasant-looking image. The second to the last composition technique is quite tricky, but I will try my best to share what I know. The golden ratio is a ratio of approximately 1.618 to 1. It has been used for centuries by artists, architects, and musicians, but it can also be found everywhere in nature. To use the golden ratio in photography, you simply apply it to the placement of objects in your composition, or follow the golden crop or the phi grid. To observe this rule, you need to place your subject on the golden mean intersection. You might notice that it looks the same as the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is actually a simpler version of the phi grid. Another way to follow the golden ratio rule is using the Fibonacci spiral as a guide in the placement of your props and subject. Honestly, it took me some time to use this in my compositions, but after a lot of practice, I am naturally using it and apply this rule unconsciously to most of my styling and my shots. Finally, the last composition technique is your very own technique, your own unique style, your very own creativity. My top tip is this: memorize the composition techniques and rules, then break it. Keep practicing. Negative space, the golden ratio, symmetry, shapes, and patterns are all around. The more photographs you compose, the better you'll get at recognizing and using it. So just to recap, 9 composition techniques that you can use as a guide in photography are leading lines, shapes and patterns, diagonals, rule of thirds, symmetry, negative space, human touch, the golden ratio, and your very own composition. In the next lesson, I will show you the 4 shooting angles and how it helped me in commercial food photo shoots. See you there!